breakfast.
Good morning, and welcome to Comics for Breakfast. I'm your host, Jason Mink. Today's subject, leftovers. That's right, even the best planned meal may leave behind a few choice nuggets. To wit, today's three-course extravaganza. Now, these books were cut from a previous episode, but that doesn't make them bad. It just makes them all the more savory. How so? Allow me to elucidate. In 1965, publisher Harry Shorten began working with legendary artist Wally Wood on a new line of books. Unlike the standard 12-cent 32-pagers offered from Marvel or DC, the newly launched Tower Comics would give you a big 64 pages of art and story for just a quarter. Alongside Wood's flagship title, The Thunder Agents, Tower would offer a handful of superheroes, 3 issues of the war title Fight the Enemy, and today's first subject, the Sam Schwartz-created Tippy Teen. And while many of you are thinking, come on, Mink, that's another Archie clone, I'm here to tell you Tippy Teen is so much more. Sure, the book shares some DNA with the Riverdale gang, thanks to creator Sam Schwartz, who'd drawn Jughead for years, but Tippy and the gang are no mere doppelgangers. Sure, there are some unarguable similarities. Why did it become Scottish there for a second? I was going for a German accent, I swear. The dynamic between Tippy and her best friend Go-Go is clearly evocative of Archie and Jughead's rapid back and forths. Animal is obviously a slightly more affable Big Moose, and so on. For all that, the book stands on its own, thanks to some smart, sharp writing and, of course, some lovely artwork from Schwartz and Company. Let's get into it. Today we look at this special edition published by Tower in 1969. This is essentially a best-of collection for we kids who missed the book the first time around. And here's our number one gal to tell us all about it. Tippy invites us to sit down and laugh until it hurts, but then what are we supposed to do? I guess read it near a bed so you can lie down and recover for a bit afterwards. We begin with Joyce showing off her ginchy new decor to pals Tippy and Go-Go. The latter is so inspired she rushes home to do the same thing to her room, but Go-Go being Go-Go approaches the decorating in an entirely different way. Next up, it's chemical warfare. Tippy is head over heels for dreamy science teacher Professor Caldwell. She extols his virtues to Go-Go, who is both unimpressed and mortified that her friend would be attracted to a 26-year-old. Tippy's so infatuated she doesn't even recognize longtime suitor Tommy Trippett, who is understandably alarmed at this recent turn of events. Tippy gets it into her head that Professor Caldwell should be her date to the prom. She stops by Madame Zaza's perfume emporium to find a suitable scent to ensnare the unknowing professor. We get a fun little run of jokes courtesy of writer Jack Mendelson, whose dialogue is sharp and snappy. The kids, unable to afford the expensive perfume, are chased out of the store, but Tippy isn't about to give up. She spies what appears to be a great deal on perfume. Eau du Swamp is both cheap and exotic. For 69 cents, how could she go wrong? Tippy being Tippy not only runs the touchdown, but spikes the ball in the form of pouring the entire bottle of perfume into her bathwater. Cartoon or not, that's gotta sting. Now infused with the swampy stench, Tippy heads to class to catch her man, and while it appears her odorific efforts have yielded the desired fruit, it turns out the professor just likes the smell of chemicals. Down but not out, Miss Teen lays it on the line, asking the professor in so many words to take her to the dance, and to Tippy's surprise, Caldwell appears to acquiesce. He'll pick her up at 8. Thrilled beyond belief at this turn of events, Tippy sleepwalks through her day. The big moment comes, leading to this hilarious panel. The story features art by Archie Comics legend Harry Lucy, and his skill at rendering these gags is second to none. In the end, Tippy discovers she's not the professor's date, but his babysitter, leaving the troubled teen struggling to figure out where it all went wrong. In On With the Show, the gang are abuzz with excitement. Big rock group The Exterminators are coming to town, and the girls are desperate to meet them in person. Go-Go is confident she'll catch their eye thanks to her singing and guitar playing, but Peggy Fleagle's got her beat all hollow with a souped-up convertible. Tippy, however, seems unenthused, claiming she's not interested in the band at all. However, secretly, she's eating her heart out to meet the fellows. But how? She's not rich or talented. However, she is affable and gives great directions to boot. She helps 4 chaps find their way to the local hotel, but a mishap reveals their secret. They are the Exterminators. Tippy freaks, blacking out from the excitement. She's quickly roused from her teen coma, but inadvertently bonks drummer Sydney unconscious. So how are they going to play a show without their drummer? Before you can say 4 in the bar, a bewigged Tippy has joined the Exterminators on stage. Remarkably, Tippy's shrill tones blend effortlessly with the band, and the group knocks the audience dead. We wrap the issue with Keep 'em in Stitches, written by Jack Mendelson and art by Unknown. Tommy heads over to Tippy's place, excited at the prospect of a birthday gift from his girl. It's a groovy purple hand-knit sweater, but there's a snag. A big one, which unknits the sweater quicker than Tippy can answer the door. By the time she reaches Tommy, the big comfy sweater is reduced to wash rag size. Tommy attempts to make the best of it, but Lady Tippington is unconsolable. But our title-holding teener isn't about to throw in the shriek just yet, and opts to reknit the sweater in real time for her bemused beau. We're treated to more snappy Schwartz dialogue, the sort that sets this title at least head-to-head with the best Archie stories of the time. 5 hours later, Tippy has whipped up a replacement. Unfortunately, our tenacious teen's measurements are a titch off, and Tommy's sweater ends up more of a sleeping bag. Tommy is mortified to be seen in the oversized purple sack, but Tippy drags him off to show the kids. The gang gets in a few well-placed jibes. Tippy gives Tommy a shove, and the awkward adolescent falls into a nearby fountain. And this appears to be just the ticket, as the sweater dries and shrinks into a jazzy, form-fitting garment. Tommy shows off his new look, Tippy's given her kudos, and Peggy steams, her devilish designs defeated once again. Fun stuff. Tippy was a phenomena of the 1960s, but interestingly enough, 1975 saw the tipster and her pals return thanks to up-and-comers Atlas Comics. Oh sure, the powers that be changed her name to Vicky and updated her a bit to be more reflective of the modern era, but for 4 brief issues, Tower's swingingest teener made the scene one last time. Can you dig it? Next up, a truly tasty leftover indeed, in the form of Bernie Wrightson's Master of the Macabre. This was intended to be part of our big Halloween episode of Halloween for Breakfast, but I miscounted Sundays and we had 1 extra. But hey, the past's loss is the future's gain. Published in 1983 by Pacific Comics, this series featured work from Wrightson's early years, working at Warren Publishing and other magazine companies, with many of these stories appearing in color for the first time. This morning we're looking at number 1. This is actually number 4 because I mislaid number 1, but trust me, it's all full of creepy goodness. Our first terrifying tale begins in darkness. Slowly, a new consciousness manifests, thoughts stirring within a jigsaw puzzle of stitched corpse parts. And yet, in spite of the thing's creator attempting to infuse his macabre creation with life, the mass of flesh remains prone, seemingly inert. Old Doc is the resentful type and takes his creation apart with far less delicacy than he put it together. He hacks his project to bits and then melts it in aqua regia, reducing what would have been his greatest success to, quote, a thick, foul-smelling black sludge, dumping what's left down the drain. Hey, you want clogged pipes? 'Cause that's how you get clogged pipes. In spite of being reduced to goo, the sentience remains active, slowly spilling down the hill, over the mountainside, and back into the graveyard that spawned it. The goo gets into a grave, and whammo, instant Frankenstyle monster. The now ambulatory being makes its way back to the lab in a bid to have a reckoning with its creator, but the mere sight of the thing drives the doc mad. Our tale ends with the thing losing itself, first in the wilds of nature, and then surrendering to the forces which in the end cannot be defied. It's a bittersweet ending expertly rendered by Wrightson, who transforms the unsettling into something eerily beautiful. Next up, grab your life jacket and snorkel and hop in as we go in search of the Pepper Lake Monster. Sponsored by a large university on a grant to study rumors of sea monsters, George Summers is put out by his latest case. Pepper Lake is no Loch Ness. Why, it isn't even a Gujarama Creek. What looks like a bust suddenly gets very real, with a sudden storm turning the once placid lake into a churning cauldron of black water. And then he sees it. The Pepper Lake Monster breaks the surface, twisting and writhing in the storm-tossed waves. The investigator is stunned and excited, but the only proof he has ever found quickly resubmerges, leaving him with nothing but a big dumb look on his face. He heads into town to recruit some help in recruiting the beast, but surprisingly the townspeople are apathetic to his efforts. Undeterred, Summers decides to do the job himself and busily sets out assembling a great net in which to entrap the monster. It takes 2 weeks, but in the end the entire reef is booby-trapped with an elaborate network of snares and snags. Later that night, he passes out exhausted from his effort, but wakes to find it's been rewarded. He's caught the Pepper Lake Monster. The next morning the villagers all stare and wonder at the great beast. Summers explains how he'll exploit the creature to bring himself great fame and wealth, which, surprisingly, doesn't go over all that well with the locals. They're not hep to big city folks snatching up their local wildlife and show their displeasure in the reddest of ways. In the end, Summers' corpse is disposed of, the monster is set free, and the town sign gets a little update. We wrap the issue up with an adaptation of the Edgar Allan Poe classic, The Black Cat. Our tale begins in a secluded mountain cabin where a married couple live a blissful lifestyle, looking after their menagerie of animals. One critter in particular seems to have taken a shine to the narrator, a large black cat named Ebony. And while at first the feline's constant presence is amusing, soon the cat becomes an irritation. The relationship, once cozy, grows increasingly adversarial until one night things go sideways. Drunk on wine, the narrator and the cat have a nasty one-on-one. Enraged, the man takes out his penknife and cuts one of the cat's peepers out. Yowza! Naturally, this strains the relationship, and eventually he just rubs the cat out completely. He returns to his home, but later that night a fire sweeps through the ancient house. All is destroyed save a large bas relief on one ruined wall, that of a cat with a noose around its neck. Consumed with guilt from his cowardly act, the narrator loses himself in drink until one night he finds a little black kitty outside of the bar. It's only once he gets the pitiful creature home he discovers it has but one eye, a revelation which somehow doesn't ring alarm bells. At first things seem jake, but this guy is a lousy pet owner, and before you know it he's looking to kill this one too. Someone get PETA on the phone, or at least Bubbles. This kitty justifiably trips the butt munch down the steps, and he axes it to leave in no uncertain terms. However, his wife intervenes, and so he brains her with the axe instead. This guy's all over the place. He excavates the section of the wall to hide his wife's body in. The cops show up a few days later but can find no evidence of foul play, at least until there's a blood-curdling cry from the basement. Before you can say nevermore, the cops head downstairs and dig up the wall to find corpse wife and yowling accuser cat. Oddly enough, that was the name of the band I was in back in the 1980s. Check us out. You can see our videos on Facebook. What a ride, huh? Wrightson's style is perfect for adapting the work of classic horror authors. His story Cool Air remains one of the best Lovecraft adaptations to ever see print. Now, I was lucky enough to pick these books up a few years back for $1 a throw. There were only 5 issues printed, and they remain widely available if you're a fan of Bernie Wrightson or you just like creepy comics in general. Well, this is the one for you. We're going to wrap things up with a look at a character that, remarkably, we've never featured here on Breakfast before. It's the one and only Superman from DC Comics, naturally. So, why has it taken Big Blue so long to make it to Breakfast? Well, to be honest with you, I've never really been a big fan of the character. Growing up in the 1970s, the common perception was that Superman was about as exciting as a glass of warm tap water. For me, it was like reading a comic book about my dad or something. No matter what wild adventures or fantastic foes the character might encounter, I just couldn't get excited about old Supes. Oh, sure, the movie was wildly popular and kept him in the spotlight for a few more years. Sorry about that, buddy. But in the world of comics, Superman was strictly from Dollsville. Now, we're going to look at Action Comics number 397. If I'd read this book as a kid, would it have changed my mind? I don't know. But what about today? Let's find out. Lois married Jimmy, a big wheel, and Superman old? What the heck happened? Well, it's a funny story. Outside of the TV studio, Jimmy Olsen flips a coin towards a wheelchair-bound beggar's can. And surprise, the down on his luck conjure is none other than Superman. Wow, way to flex, bro. Jimmy's harpy-like companion nags him, but one-time pal feels compelled to stick around and help. Sadly, once folks get a gander at that unmistakable getup, the elderly hero is mobbed by reporters and curious citizens alike. Oh man, they're even pointing him out on the tour bus. We get a super-speed getaway courtesy of the wheelchair, and our hero recounts how he ended up in such sorry straits. At a certain point in the future, Superman discovers his talents have been eclipsed by human technology. His remarkable abilities and origin make him less of a superhero and more of a super freak, and not the fun Rick James kind. Back in his tenement of solitude, our hero is about to heat vision a nice bowl of tomato soup when his reverie is interrupted by a welcome sight. Jimmy's managed to track his pal back to the dump, and after a touching reunion, Superman gives it to Jimmy blow by blow. With the world needing him less and less, the Man of Steel's powers inexplicably began to wane. Worse still, he quickly grew enfeebled, barely able to move without a cane. He became dependent on his robots, but eventually lost the capacity to repair them. Somehow, oddly without savings, in spite of owning a fortress full of priceless artifacts, Superman was kicked out of a series of Skid Row homes. Knowing his days as a hero were up, Superman traded his cape for an old blanket and a pair of Roy Orbison shades, and went into hiding. Moments later, we meet Superman's neighbors, Dr. Carl Weathers and his wife. Turns out Superman wasn't out there begging for himself. He was hobo proxy on behalf of these two. What a guy. Jimmy decides to take matters into his own pasty hands and wheels his buddy off to see a specialist. We learn the whole thing is performance-based anxiety thanks to Superman screwing up a few times. And while it seems like good news, it only frustrates our hero. If it's all in his head, why can't he just think it away? Superman bitterly wheels off, heading back to do laundry with his eyes. Hey, He could get a paying gig on Carson doing that. That is, if he could do it without setting the place on fire, which apparently he can't, and while he's invulnerable, his plague pals are not, and plead with him to do something, anything, to save them. And here's the payoff, in the form of Superman standing up. It's a miracle any time I can manage it as well. Deep within his fighting heart comes a surge of super courage, allowing our hero to fly his friends to safety, only they die. Jeez, did Franz Kafka write this? He buries the radioactive corpses 10 miles underground in a steel vault before returning to the surface. Only instead of simply resuming life as before, Superman decides Earth no longer needs his services. However, there's a chance that somewhere out there in the entirety of our solar system, there still waits a job for Superman. As an older reader, I can appreciate what's happening here. The book's creators were clearly aware that the perception among some kids was their biggest property was, in a word, dull. Did the world really need a Superman? Well, I think the story proves that then and now, the answer is a resounding yes. At the end of the day, it's not about the absurd amount of superpowers or the convoluted and often bizarre twists and turns the average story would take. It's about the fact that no matter what, there was one man who would never give in, who would never surrender to the forces of tyranny and oppression. Here's to you, Superman. Thank you for joining us on this off-the-wall episode of Comics for Breakfast. Turns out it's fun to mix things up. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe. If it really cracked your slab, well, head on over to the Old Guys Who Like Old Comics swag shop and pick up a mug, a t-shirt, or one of the other fine items that you can only find there. I'm Jason Mink, and I hope to see you next week at breakfast.